Didn't know if you knew this or not, but next week is Family Dispute Resolution Week, and apparently Premier Kathleen Wynne is giving the keynote address for the first ever concert surrounding the week on Monday. The events will stretch through November 27th. The conference is there to address what is optimal, when it is optimal, to go to court over a family dispute or divorce case, and to display what resources are available to families going through these rough times. To talk more about all of this, Gary Dierenfeld is with us, social worker, yoursocialworker.com, to find out more. He's with us now. Good afternoon, Gary. How are you today?
Good, Scott. Great to be with you. And if I can just point the listeners to the website, FDR Week, fdrweek.ca, because there persons of the public can get access to a whole schedule of events for next week across the province where they can go and come to better understand alternatives to court, which really should be the primary dispute resolution strategies.
That's fdrweek.ca, fdrweek.ca. All right, what's the objective here? What's the whole idea between Family Dispute Resolution Week?
Yeah, so when we look at parents who are separating and they can't sort things out between themselves, there is a number of alternatives for them to get help to come to some sort of solution. Unfortunately, many parents think that the default place to go is family court, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The courts are clogged, and if you go to a third party to impose a decision, typically one parent will say Yahoo, the other parent says boo-hoo.
Yeah.
The one who went Yahoo now has a target on their back by the one who went boo-hoo, looking to rewrite the wrong. And so outcomes achieved at court, because of that, they're typically not durable. They don't last as long, and they're not well followed. And that's the problem, because it actually escalates conflict. Whereas if people go to sort things out with support between with other helpers, typically those outcomes last longer and are better followed.
How do you get two parents who are perhaps at each other's throats to see through this forest of conflict?
Well, there you go. And that's why things like you and I talking today and FDR Week are so important, because there's a lot of myths out there held by parents in conflict that they can't be in the same room, they can't sort this out, the other parent won't go. Truth of the matter is, when provided with these options, most parents actually do follow through. And even in going to court, parents don't realize this either. The judge is first of all, you don't just go to court and the judge gives you a decision. There's a series of different meetings that occur before any trial takes place. And at every one of those meetings, the judge is trying to impress upon the parents to sort things out between themselves first, up to and including even using the mediation services in virtually every courthouse.
Why? What makes this work? Why is this better?
Well, it's better because, first of all, no judge, no third-party arbitrator will ever know the details of your situation as intimately as yourself. And so when a third person has to make those decisions, it's so common for both parents to come away dissatisfied, saying, if only they knew this, if only they knew that, if only we could fine-tune this afterwards or that afterwards. When you're in mediation or when you're in collaborative law, you have you retain that power to control the outcome. You're not going to sign off on anything until you feel that you can live with it. And Scott, sometimes those agreements, I call them the plug your nose and move forward agreement. Better to have an agreement that you may not love, but that you can live with, than something that's imposed where the other side may still be angry or that you can't live with.
You said earlier that, if you leave it up to the courts, inevitably one will lose, one will win, or one will be happier than the other. What happens if you have a party that says, that's okay, I want that, I want to win, I want them to lose?
Right. I got to tell you, paradoxically, those are often the ones that do lose, just to let you know that. And also,
so the ones that want revenge or vengeance are usually the ones that come out on the wrong end of the stick.
Right, because they're the ones that appear angry, and their anger may get in the way of their judgment, and so that's what's at play. And what they're looking for at court often is vindication or validation, and that's not what court's about. You are not going to achieve that at court. And if you go in thinking that is your goal, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And if you go in there thinking you're going to get a moral victory because, the other parent looked at porn or the other parent had an affair, the courts aren't there to moralize. They're there to divide property and sort out how you're going to care for your children between the two of you. And if one of you had an affair, quite frankly, the courts aren't going to care about that.
Is watching porn grounds for divorce?
It's not that it's first of all, in Ontario, we have no-fault divorce. After a year of separation, you don't need to prove who was the bigger scoundrel. If you do want a divorce prior to a year of separation, then, you have to show grounds. But by the time it marches through the court process, it's always later than a year later anyways. So you may be egreged at the behavior of your former partner, but that behavior may not be a factor in sorting out the care of children or the division of property between the two of you. So do not look to the courts to seek revenge or vengeance.
What are you trying to do when you're going and getting a divorce? What do you have to prove? Like, basically what you're doing is you're deciding custody and you're splitting up assets that were obtained in the marriage. Is it not fairly cut and dry nowadays?
And there's the irony. And in fact, it is fairly cut and dry. Where it can get a little muddled is depending on your finances and holdings and the value of your company, who bought what, when, and where, who has the receipts to show for what. But whether it's at court or in any of these forms of alternate dispute resolution, we do require full disclosure of all financial information. If someone truly is withholding something, a court order can be obtained in order to cause that person to produce the information. But that's what we're trying to sort out. Who's responsible for what financially, what obligations might there be in terms of spousal support or child support. And again, those things typically these days, they're quite cut and dry. There are calculators on websites that will spit out the number or range of numbers. When it comes to custody and access, this can be trickier because what parent wants to consider themselves less than 100% parent? Right? So there's adjustment issues that have to be, taken into play there. If there are issues of concerns about the care one parent will provide, those things can be discussed in collaborative law, mediation, counseling as well, and can be addressed in the settlement agreement.
Can't a court do what this process is trying to do, or is it the advantage is that it's less winner, loser, more you win some, you lose some on both sides?
Well, it's definitely you win some, you lose some on both sides with respect to alternate dispute resolution. And quite frankly, I don't know that I like win some, lose some. You're playing to a higher priority. And here's the higher priority. What can I walk away with that I can at least feel good about, and without having to spend $50,000 to $100,000 in terms of my legal fees should this matter go to court?
Is that the biggest advantage? Is just the simple cost of it all?
No, but that's a huge advantage. Let me tell you. You shouldn't have to sell the farm in order to find a resolution. But the bigger advantage still is you have control of the outcome.
Right.
And that's the biggest advantage, Scott, that you're not putting all your eggs into somebody else's basket and you don't know what you're going to get back.
And the question I'm going to ask has as much to do with, settling the deal as it does about living with it before and afterwards. Do couples realize when wanting a divorce what life will be like afterwards? So many, and again, maybe this is coming from observers who are watching other people go through it. But sometimes find myself asking when I see friends going through this, and I certainly can't judge or put myself in their shoes, but I'm thinking to myself a lot of the time, will life be better when this is done than it is now? Do couples often think it might be different than what
Will
it really
the grass be greener on the other side?
Bingo.
Yeah. And you know what? That really depends on your situation. We certainly suggest to folks, before you pull the plug on the relationship, go for counseling. You know, counseling is a hell of a lot cheaper than going through a divorce, and typically less emotionally arduous. And maybe there's something in counseling that can help you resolve your relationship. The other thing is, if you have what I call a marriage on the cusp, where one or other party really is contemplating divorce or already has a foot out the door, still go to counseling. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, the counselor may still help you resolve a few issues, communicate more effectively, such that if you are still going to get divorced, you can do so more reasonably.
Obviously, people get a divorce. They don't want to be together. They want a certain person out of their life. Do they realize that may not happen, especially if they have kids? I mean, you still have to have an ongoing relationship with this person.
Excellent question. So you can separate as intimate partners, but if you have kids, you're joined at the hips for life. And kids grow up, they say, I'm half this parent, I'm half that parent. And therefore, they're looking to have a meaningful relationship with both. Kids need to be loved by both parents. So sometimes the counseling, the mediation, the collaborative law process can help these parents to come to understand that and achieve agreements that truly are focused on the needs of their kids, not the confusion of their anger as needs for their kids.
We often hear in the old days people used to just stay together for their kids. Nowadays, you've got lots of options, the old people say, and you just don't have the commitment, so you decide to get a divorce. Do people ever stay together for the kids? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, we still see that, and whether or not that is a good idea really depends on those parents. Statistically, there is research to say that if you're in a rough patch now, with or without counseling, typically in 5 years, people are feeling better about their situation, and whatever was at play 5 years earlier typically has resolved. So there is good news in terms of just hunkering down and staying together. But again, if you want to accelerate that process, if you want to improve things before that, get your egos out of the way, go to counseling.
Do we underestimate, as divorcing parents, how much this does affect the kids?
I would have to say, yeah, that most parents do underestimate it. And it's not because they're bad parents. It's because none of us ever want to think that we're bringing harm to our kids by virtue of what we're putting them through. And so we don't want to deal with our own guilt and or shame. So many parents don't realize how tumultuous this actually is on their kids. And that's where, again, that counseling is so good. If we can help the parents sort things out better between themselves, then the trickle down to the kids can be far less, and their lives can be far better.
What is the divorce rate now?
I think the divorce rate in Canada has settled out at around 38%. There was talk a few years back up to about 50%. Yeah. But it seemed to have simmered down and plateaued around 37, 38% in Canada. The other thing about all of this, Scott, is if you are going to use lawyers, be careful about your choice of lawyers, because inadvertently lawyers can actually ratchet up the very conflict that you're looking to minimize, to extinguish. If you have a lawyer who themselves only knows how to litigate, it's like you only have one tool in the toolbox, then they're going to seek to march it to court, because that's what they do on all their files. They may send angry or demanding letters to the other client, to the other party that you haven't even read, and then when you get the backlash from that, you don't even know what's going on. So if you are using a lawyer, ask them if they practice collaborative family law, if they're favorable about mediation, if they only practice litigation. It's like if you go to a surgeon, you know what you're going to get?
Yeah.
Surgery.
Exactly.
Right. So if you go to a lawyer that has a range of trainings, specialties, and appreciations, you've just got more options open to you.
If people want to find out more about this, what do we do? Where can we go?
Well, if you go to fdrweek.ca, that's a great resource now, because there you'll also get to Family Dispute Resolution Institute of Ontario. Oh my God. we've got too big of names in some of these organizations, but you can learn about some of the alternatives to court. If you go to my website, www.yoursocialworker.com, click on the link that says services, you'll see my listing of services. I don't go to court anymore, and the reason I don't go to court is, you know what? It's too much of a crap show. It's people are too unhappy at the end of it. It's very expensive. And here's the irony. Going into it, people like the professionals, we typically know the range within what the outcome is going to be anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, like we've been doing this for 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years, some of us. So we know what the likely outcomes are going to be. Why go to court? Let's get you within that range. Find a place where you can plug your nose and move forward.
Gary Dierenfeld has been with us, social worker, yoursocialworker.com to find out more. And, of course, the website for the Resolution Week, fdrweek.ca, fdrweek.ca. Gary, as always, thanks for the time. Much appreciated.
Great to be with you, Scott.
It is.